Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I'm back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, is lifting heavy always better for muscle growth? I don't think so. Lifting heavy is all relative to what you perceive as heavy, right? I always tell clients, would you rather lift 1,000 pounds or look like you can lift 1,000 pounds, right? For me personally, I'd rather look like I could lift 1,000 pounds. I don't want to lift 1,000 pounds. So to develop that lean, solid, dense muscle look where you're trying to sculpt your muscle bellies, you don't necessarily need to throw around the heaviest amount of weights. You have to use a weight that's going to cause some resistance. Of course, it's going to be a challenge, but it should also be a weight that you can control on both the eccentric and concentric contractions. Okay. Far too often, I see people in the gym who are both men and women who go way too heavy. And what happens is when you go too heavy, your form breaks, your technique sucks. Okay. And you're not stimulating proper muscle growth. So you're better off checking your ego at the door, going in with the mindset as I'm going to take this muscle to true failure. And the weight I lift is irrelevant as long as it's challenging. And that's how I've approached every single workout that I've ever done. I've never cared about how much weight I'm lifting. I've cared about that I'm controlling the repetitions and I'm focusing on that mind to muscle connection because that's how you're going to stimulate muscle growth. Okay. It's honestly the truth because there's a lot of people out there who lift really heavy weights. You look at powerlifters. Powerlifters lift crazy heavy weights, right? You got guys who are deadlifting 800 pounds. You got guys who are squatting 900 pounds. You got these guys who are bench pressing 315 for reps. These guys are strong. They've got tons and tons and tons of muscle, but it's not sculpted muscle, right? So if you want to develop that aesthetically pleasing physique, you really have to focus on technique, okay? And not just throwing around heavy weight, okay? And that's not to say that powerlifting is not good for building muscle. It is, but if you're going to try to develop those aesthetically pleasing physiques and build that solid, lean, dense muscle, you're going to want to focus on those higher repetitions, controlling both the eccentric and concentric contractions, and focusing on that mind to muscle connection, okay? So remember, it's not about the amount of weight that you lift. It's how you're lifting that weight that matters. And you're controlling that weight. You're stimulating muscle fibers. And you're not always thinking, I have to keep increasing the weight. Okay. Many times I've talked about this in the past in my own workouts, some of clients' workouts. Say we're doing 4 rounds of barbell back squats. We'll do our heaviest set on the third set, and then I'll drop the weight for the fourth set because I know that the muscles are getting tired. I know that the form's going to break. So now I'm going to drop the weight a little bit. Okay, I might throw in some drop sets, triple drop sets, quadruple drop sets, supersets, whatever it may be, but I'm not just going to focus on adding more weight to the bar. There's many ways to increase intensity of the gym that have nothing to do with the amount of weight that you're lifting. Remember that. Okay. So no, it's not about how heavy you can lift. It's making sure that you can control your repetitions, making sure that you're practicing proper form and technique. And as I said, really trying to focus on that mind to muscle connection while you're doing the concentric and eccentric contraction of each and every repetition. All right. Okay. Nick, what's the most underrated exercise for abs? Hmm. I don't know if it's the most underrated exercise, but the exercise that I found has worked the best for me over the years are hanging leg raises. And it sucks because ever since my inguinal hernia surgery, I can't do them right now. I'm not supposed to do them right now. But I really noticed when I started doing hanging leg raises, I don't know what it was about that movement, but it really helped bring in my midsection. I neglected that exercise for years. And then as I started getting deeper and deeper into competitions, I saw more and more bodybuilders doing that exercise. I'm like, maybe I should try doing that exercise. And it worked. And I think it works because with a hanging leg raise, you're working both your transverse and your rectus abdominals. And to an extent, you're even working your intercostals and obliques. So it's almost like a 4-in-1. So that's my theory as to why that works. If you're a beginner, I recommend doing hanging knee raises. So bringing your knees up to your chest while you're hanging on some type of apparatus. And then once you get more advance with your training, you develop a stronger core, you can now go with straight leg raises as opposed to knees to chest, bring your toes straight up to your chest. I find those work really well. If you have issues with your grip, get a pair of grabbers or a pair of straps so that you can hang and you don't have to worry about your forearm extensors. But I don't know if they're an underrated exercise. I mean, I do give that exercise to quite a few of my clients, but it's a difficult exercise to do. It's definitely not a beginner's exercise. So if you were someone who's a beginner, I would not recommend doing that exercise. But as you get more advanced, if you're training over the years and you develop a stronger core, it's a great one to throw into your arsenal because again, I just find it works really well, not just for me, but for other bodybuilders I've worked with, clients I work with, just to develop that overall strength in the core. So don't forget though, too, that if your body fat levels are, for men, above 13, 14%, you're not going to see those abs. I don't care how strong your core is. You're not going to see them. There's going to be a layer of fat covering them. Okay. And for women, same thing. If your body fat's over 20%, you're not really going to see those abs. So low body fat or lower body fat is going to help bring out those abdominals more. And that comes from diet, training, cardiovascular training, and obviously supplementation as well. All right. Okay. Nick, do you really need to warm up before lifting? Uh, I would. I strongly would advise it. And my definition of warming up is not walking on a treadmill. It's not doing 30 minutes of stretching. It could be something so simple as you're going in and you're doing chest. Well, rather than throw on a 45 for each side, start with a quick warm up set. Don't count it as an actual working set, but just with the bar. And I have every single person I work with do that. And the reason I do that is I just want to check to make sure everything's working in order. I want to make sure that, they get under that bar if we're doing chest, for example, and they start doing a bench press. And yeah, the rotator cuffs feel okay. The elbows feel okay. Just overall, the joints are feeling good. If not, they're like, oh, something feels tight. Well, I'd rather them feel that tightness with just the bar as opposed to putting on 135 pounds. And all of a sudden now we've got problems because we're coming down with weight that could cause an injury. So that's how I warm people up. Even throughout the workout, I continuously warm people up. So when we're doing circuit training, every time it's a new exercise on the first set, I will give every single person I work with a weight that I know that they could easily knock out 20, 25 reps with. I don't ask them for 20 to 25 reps, but I know that they can do 20, 25 reps because all I'm trying to do on a new exercise is release synovial fluid into the joints. And synovial fluid, I've talked about this in the past, it's like WD-40 for the joints, tendons, and ligaments. So once I know that that person can do that plane and that range of motion with the exercise that I'm giving them, now I can start increasing the weight. Okay. And that's how I train everybody. That's how I train myself. And I really attribute that to staying injury free for 20 plus years. Okay. So yes, I do believe you should warm up. No, I don't think you need to walk on a treadmill or you need to do 30 minutes of stretching. You could throw in some dynamic stretching. There's nothing wrong with even doing some dynamic stretching in between sets, but I would avoid doing static stretching. So remember the difference between dynamic versus static. Dynamic, you're moving, whereas static, you're holding. The problem with doing a static stretch in between each set is that you're taking a muscle into a state of relaxation when you stretch it out in a state of a static stretch, right? So the last thing you want to do is have a muscle go into relaxation and then you simulate it hard for a set, then you go back into relaxation, you simulate it hard for a set. Now you're asking for problems because you risk tearing a tendon, tearing a joint, or tearing a muscle belly. Okay. I shouldn't say tearing a joint, but straining a joint. Okay. So my recommendation is yes, warm up on every single exercise, but it doesn't have to be through 30 minutes of stretching. It doesn't have to be through treadmill, band work, all this nonsense, foam roller. You can just do warm up with pyramiding. You can just make sure that the joints, ligaments, and tendons feel good and really pay attention to how your body's feeling. This is crucial. Okay. Really focus. Like when you're doing that bench press, okay, how does that feel on my shoulders? How does that feel on my elbows? If it's not feeling good, maybe you shouldn't start with the incline barbell bench press. Maybe you should start with dumbbell bench press. Okay. And I've done that numerous times with clients over the years. I'm like, they'll come in and like, this isn't feeling right away. I'm like, okay, no problem. We're going to come back to this exercise. Let's start you off with a high incline dumbbell press. That feels good. No problem. Great. Half an hour later, we go into the low incline barbell press. That's fine. Perfect. Okay. So you have to pay attention to your body and you really have to feel out the exercise. Okay. That's crucial. If you want to stay injury free, make sure you warm up. All right. Okay. Nick, how do celebrities get ripped so fast? Oh. Here's the thing with a lot of these celebrities. People will say, well, if I had millions of dollars, I could have a personal trainer, I could have a nutritionist, I could have my own private chef. You still have to be somewhat self-disciplined. You still have to put in the work. You still have to go to the gym. You still have to eat the meals. So even though you have someone cooking your meals, even though you might have a personal trainer, well, the personal trainer is not lifting the weight for you, and the chef is not eating the food for you. You have to still put in the work. You still have to eat the clean food. Okay. So a lot of these celebrities, especially if they're, actors, for example, who are doing like action roles like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, they're very self-motivated individuals. So, I mean, if they say, you got to get in top shape for a movie and start filming that in 6 months, you better believe when there's millions of dollars on the line, they're going to do it, of course. So I think there's already that added incentive from the payday. And also because they want to be in their best shape for the role that they're playing. Okay. So there's that added incentive. Yes, it does help if you have a personal trainer, obviously, because then you can troubleshoot and it's like fast track your results because you're working with a trained professional. So it's not making this trial and error of what should I be lifting? What exercise should I do next? You're working with a professional that's going to guide you, that's going to make sure that you're staying on track. And they're going to use metrics to gauge your progress, right? And the same thing with having a dietitian or nutritionist and your own private chef, it definitely helps. Okay. Is there some supplementation involved? I would say yes in some cases for sure, especially for some of these guys like say Christian Bale or Keanu Reeves or even again Dwayne Johnson. I'm not suggesting that they are using steroids, but I'd be very surprised if they were not using some form of anabolic steroids to get ready for certain movie roles over the years. Because me personally, I don't see people's or I don't see many people's bodies changing that quickly if they're training naturally. Okay. But if they're using some assisted help with anabolic steroid usage, yes, that can be done. Okay. I also assume that a lot of these people who are using anabolic steroids are being monitored by a doctor. And again, I'm not accusing anyone of using steroids. I'm just saying that I've never seen anyone make crazy body transformations like they do without the usage of anabolic steroids. Okay. But that's not to say that, you can't get great results trained naturally because you can. But I wouldn't be trying to compare yourself to a celebrity because if you don't have access to a private chef, if you don't have access to work with a personal trainer 6 days a week in the gym, a lot of people can't afford that. Then you have to say, well, okay, well, I don't have those things, but do I need those things? Because yeah, I don't need to look like The Rock, but I can create the best version of myself. Okay, so that's why I always tell people try to stay in your own lane. Don't compare yourself to others. I even tell my own clients, don't compare yourself to others outside the gym. Okay, stay in your own lane. Focus on what you can do because you have your genetics. Someone else has their genetics. For you to follow the same program as someone else, that's ridiculous because you're going to get different results. Okay, if I talked about this before, is if I give two people the exact same diet, the exact same training program, they're going to have different results. Okay. Some people are endomorphs. They put on weight very easily. Some people are ectomorphs. They lose weight very easily. That sounds great on paper for the ectomorph, but they have a hard time putting on weight when it comes to muscle. That sounds bad for the endomorph, but they have an easier time putting on muscle. So you have to work with someone's body type. You have to understand your genetic structure, and you have to be realistic with what your goals and expectations are based on your activity level, your lifestyle, and really how often you can get yourself into the gym and how disciplined you can remain on your diet. So I wouldn't compare yourself to celebrities, and I wouldn't just accuse all celebrities of taking fat burners and anabolic steroids because not all of them do. And I'm not suggesting that the ones I mentioned do. I'm just saying that when you see these very quick transformations, in my opinion, doing that naturally is very difficult and very rare to see that unless you have a genetic freak. There's usually some assistance with the anabolic steroid usage. All right. Okay. Nick, is CrossFit still relevant or is it now considered dangerous? Um, it's interesting because I was talking about CrossFit the other day with one of my clients, and I remember back, I want to say I think it was, God, 2006 through 2009. CrossFit was so popular. There was this CrossFit craze. I know here in Vancouver, British Columbia, there was like 10 gyms that opened up downtown in a span of like 24 months, all CrossFit gyms. People were doing CrossFit. They loved CrossFit. We actually had clients leave us for CrossFit. And I honestly thought, like, at the time, I mean, I've been training at that point for probably about 6 years. I was like, oh no, are we going to start losing business to this new fad, this new trend? Is this the way that the fitness industry is going? And then slowly, what started to happen is more and more people started to get injured with CrossFit. And we ourselves had clients return to us who had been injured doing CrossFit movements. So I've talked about CrossFit in the past, and I think a lot of people think I hate CrossFit, and I don't hate CrossFit. Do I think CrossFit is dangerous? I think CrossFit's more dangerous than bodybuilding. Absolutely. I think if you are someone who understands how to do these technical movements correctly, and you are working with a trained professional who can be a second set of eyes, I think it can be done in a safe manner. However, for the general population, I feel that it can be incredibly dangerous. Because a lot of people who do CrossFit, they're not really well versed when it comes to anatomy and physiology. And there's that CrossFit mentality as more is better, more weight is better, more reps are better, more reps in less time is better. And a lot of these movements are ballistic. So I've never been a huge fan of CrossFit. And when it comes to if I think it's becoming dated or if I think it's on its way out, I don't know if it's on its way out because don't forget too, a lot of these trends and fads tend to regurgitate themselves. Just like I talked about last week about creatine. Creatine, that supplement that everyone, I have so many clients ask me about creatine now. Creatine has been around since the 80s. And again, tends to regurgitate itself. New studies come out, and then there's with social media, people are pumping creatine ads on Instagram reels, and now creatine is the big thing in the supplement industry. So CrossFit was the big thing. It's died out a little bit now. Will it make a resurgence? Possibly. It could. Bodybuilding's gone through that too. Bodybuilding was really big in the 90s, and then in the early 2000s, it started to fizzle out a little bit. And then there was a resurgence in 2010. I have a lot of competitors working with me now because now they have for way more classes. There's no longer just open bodybuilding. Now you have men's physique, you have classic physique, you have the board short boys, you have bikini, you have women's physique, you have women's wellness. So there's all these different classes that people can train in. So now the bodybuilding realm is bigger than it's ever been. Okay. And that industry is exploding now. But there was a time when that slowed down. So it's difficult to say. I can say noticing around here though, where I live in downtown Vancouver, there's been quite a few CrossFit gyms that have closed up in the last, 5, 10 years. Now, is that potentially due to COVID? Maybe. But I also think a lot of these trends tend to fizzle out and people go on to the next thing. So right now, Pilates is huge. Okay. So how long will that stay big for? Yoga was massively busy back in God, the early 2000s, and it's still busy today. But I noticed a lot of people who were doing yoga kind of stopped doing yoga. There's not as many yoga gyms where I am anyway, which is downtown. Not as many yoga gyms as there once was, 10 years ago. So these things tend to fizzle out. But I'm not a big fan of CrossFit. Really, I'm not. And like I said, for the average person, I would say that there's definitely more risks than benefits. But I'm not trying to, persuade people not to do CrossFit because if you truly enjoy doing that type of lifting, I say do it for sure. I mean, you do whatever the hell you want. But if you're asking me for my honest opinion, and it's an unbiased opinion as well. It really is because whether you're working with me or not, I truly believe that the safest and most effective way to train is following bodybuilding splits, bodybuilding exercises, double digit repetitions, very short rest periods, moderate intensity, not ridiculously high intensity, not ballistic movements, controlled movements. The safest and most effective way to get results with your physique and your health and your overall well being. All right. Okay. Okay. Nick, what's the truth about muscle memory? Is it a real thing or is it just fictitious? No, muscle memory is a real thing. I'll use me as an example here. After my hernia surgery, I took 30 days off the gym. I've now been back in the gym for 29 days. Tomorrow will be my 30th day in a row training. It took me about 2 weeks to get back up to my weights I was lifting before. And I don't think it's because I lost muscle because my weight was pretty much the same. I went into surgery, I think I weighed like 205. And when I weighed myself on day one of my post surgery, once I started training again, so 30 days later, I was still around 205. So I didn't really lose muscle. Okay. What I did lose was glycogen storage. So my muscles burned out more quickly. What I also lost was my body's ability to flush out lactic acid more efficiently and build up synovial fluid more effectively. Okay. So it took about a good 14, 15 days for my body to get back to where it was pre-surgery. Okay. Now, if I had let myself go for 6 months, 8 months to a year, yeah, I would have lost some muscle mass. Okay. So I didn't feel like I lost muscle. However, I did lose that cardiovascular endurance, that glycogen storage that allows me to lift heavier for a longer period of time. So I started back slowly. But the movements, my body still remembered how to do the movements. Like I still remembered how to do a bench press, how to do a squat, how to do a deadlift. I knew how to do all those movements, but I was sore after each and every workout for God, 3, 4, 5 days in some cases. I remember my first leg workout back, I was sore for 2 weeks straight. It felt like first time I ever did legs. Um, and what that was my body was so accustomed to those planes and ranges of motion that I've been doing for the past 20 plus years, me taking 30 days off the gym, now these movements were somewhat foreign. Okay. I still remembered how to do them because the muscle memory was there. But because I lacked that glycogen storage and my body's ability to flush out the lactic acid wasn't nearly as efficient, and the body's ability to produce synovial fluid wasn't nearly as effective, I was sore, I was tired, and I was weaker. Okay. So muscle memory is a real thing and we all have it. So you don't forget it. Okay. It's like riding a bicycle. So, you learn to ride a bicycle. Well, most people learn to ride a bicycle when they're a kid. And, you might not ride a bike for 20 years, something like that. And then you hop back on and it might take a few minutes, but you get it back again, right? Because there's the muscle memory there. The mechanics are there. So yes, muscle memory is a real thing. Now, if you're someone who maybe you only train for 3 months, and then I don't want to go to the gym, screw this. Like a lot of people, they quit and then they go back a year or 2 years later. Well, you probably don't have muscle memory. No, you got to relearn the exercises. You got to relearn form, technique, breathing, tempo, all that stuff. Okay. But if you're someone who's been lifting, you're an avid lifter, you were lifting for like 10, 15 years, you took a little hiatus, maybe you took 6 months off from the gym, maybe took a year off from the gym, yeah, you're probably going to lose some muscle, but the muscle memory is there, and your ability to produce that muscle, or sorry, that to produce more glycogen and produce more synovial fluid is more efficient than someone who's starting from scratch. So therefore, your ability to build more muscle in a shorter period of time will be much more efficient than someone who's starting from scratch. So yes, muscle memory is a real thing. All right. Okay. Uh, Nick, why don't I look like I lift weights? I've been lifting weights for 5 years, but I don't even look like I work out. Honestly, I'd have to see your physique. I don't work with you, so I'd have to take a look at your physique. I'd have to take a look at your workout program, and most importantly, I'd have to take a look at your diet. Okay. Um, you know, all these things come into play. So there's a lot of people who go to the gym and they think, well, I'm going to the gym, I'm just going to build muscle. No, you've got to work hard, and you've got to be disciplined with your diet. Okay. A lot of people, they lack that discipline. They lack that self-motivation, and they overestimate what they're doing. So, for example, someone will go to the gym twice a week and then they'll wonder why they're not really seeing results. Well, unless you're a beginner, because most beginners, if they're training twice a week, in fact, most beginners, I recommend they only train twice a week, they will see results. But in order to continuously see results, you're going to have to increase your frequency in the gym. You're going to have to increase your intensity in the gym. You're going to have to dial in your diet more efficiently, because the more muscle you start to put on and the more you start to refine your physique, lower your body fat, it doesn't get easier. It gets harder. Okay. Because now you're striving for more. You're striving for bigger biceps. You're striving for higher glutes. You're striving for a more striated chest, whatever it may be, more detailed than your delts, whatever it is. Now you've got to keep taking it up a notch. I compare it to school. You don't stay in grade one, you go to grade two, then you go to grade three, you go to grade four, and so on. You go to college, whatever it is. But you have to keep progressing, right? You don't stay at the same level. So everything gets a little bit more challenging, and you yourself have to put in more work, more time, more effort, more energy. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And that's okay. But if you don't want to do that and you want to say, you know what, going to the gym twice, 3 times a week is okay for me, then that's fine. But understand that you're not going to have the same results as someone who's going to the gym 6 days a week and who's not cheating on their diet, who's not going out drinking 3 or 4 times a week, who's not ordering from Uber Eats and all this nonsense. So again, manage your expectations. Okay. So if you're not looking like you're working out and you've been lifting for 5 years, my recommendation to you, and again, not plugging in my own services here, would be to hire a personal trainer slash coach, someone that could look over what you've been doing. Because I guarantee you there's something there that you're not doing correctly. And remember, you're not a professional in this industry. Okay. So work with someone who is, work with someone that can help you with your diet, work with someone that can tweak your training. For all you know, it actually could just be your diet's not checked. You're not getting enough protein. So you're doing your workouts, but you're not fueling your body properly. And that's going to affect your physique. It's going to affect your performance in the gym. Okay. Or you could be one of those people who, and I'm not saying you are, but you could be one of those people who thinks it's okay to look at your phone in between sets. Whereas I'm like, no, because, and I talked about this, I put a post up on my Instagram this week about that. How long should you rest between sets? If you get caught on your phone in between a set, That 45-second to max 90-second rest period can easily turn into 3 to 5 minutes. Now, when you're doing that, you're not going to stimulate muscle growth because you're training the muscle when it's 100% recovered. Okay. So I'd have to look at your training. I'd have to look at your diet. I'd have to look at your supplement protocol. And all three things combined correlates to what you're going to produce with not just your physique, but your health and your performance. Okay. But I guarantee you there's something that's missing. Okay. So my recommendation to you would be to work with a trainer, work with a nutritionist, just someone that can over have a look at what you're doing and correct it. Okay. Because, at the end of the day, do you really want to waste your time in the gym? I don't. I know when I first started working out, I was very fortunate because I was around a lot of bodybuilders. So they taught me how to train, they taught me how to eat. But if I didn't have that, I mean, I couldn't afford to work with a trainer. I started working out when I was 15. I couldn't afford to hire a personal trainer. But if I didn't have that, there would have been a lot of trial and error. But because I had those guys to lean on and ask questions, I was able to really enhance my physique naturally through diet supplementation and proper training. Okay. But without that information, I probably would have remained somewhat stagnant and I wouldn't really seen those results. So it really helps to have someone in your corner that can help guide you and can fast track the results and troubleshoot and explain to you, this is why this is not working. Okay. Because again, whatever your profession might be, you're a professional in that profession, okay? But you're not a professional in the fitness industry. So hire someone that can help you, okay? It makes a world of difference, especially if you're working with someone who is reputable, knowledgeable, experienced, comes with tons of testimonials, potentially Google reviews. So you know that what you're going to get is going to be someone who's going to give you their best coaching, and that's going to help you with your enhance your physique and your health. All right. Few more questions here. Nick, are group fitness classes a waste of time? Depends on the group fitness class that you're in. Okay. So again, I've talked about group fitness classes in the past. And one thing I always tell people is like the way I do group fitness classes, I don't believe in doing these classes that are 20 or 30 people. I understand that you can bank a lot of money from doing that. I get that. But I feel that the level of service is diluted. And what happens is when you're offering a diluted service, that can only last for so long. And people start to go there and like, well, what the hell am I paying for? I'm setting up my own stations. No one's really correcting my form. No one's correcting my technique. I mean, how can they if there's 30 people in a class with one trainer? So then people start questioning as to why they're paying for this service. And then people drop out. Okay. And I saw that for years at multiple gyms I worked at. So, I came up with the idea to say, well, I'm going to still offer group classes, but I'm going to put a capacity on my group classes. And my group classes are no more than 8 to 10 people ever. Okay. And the reason I do that is so that we can keep a watchful eye on the people who are in our group classes. Another thing that I strongly advise every single new client that wants to join a group class with us anyway is to book at least 3 to 6 private sessions, one-on-one sessions. So you do learn proper form and technique in that one-on-one setting. Okay. Because once you have that knowledge, you know how to squat properly, bench press properly, and you have that individual instruction, you can go into a group class and you feel more confident. And yeah, you're not going to get that same attention from the instructor that you're getting in your one-on-one setting, but you're still getting enough. And you don't need that same one-on-one instruction because you do feel confident. But at the same time, as a business owner, it's my job to make sure that my clients feel that they're getting the best service possible. They're paying for the service. So I'm still going to instruct them. I still teach clients who've been with me for 20 years new exercises. I still correct their form and technique. Okay. Because we can constantly continuously learn. Me, myself, I'm constantly learning. I actually just learned a new exercise this week. So there's always room to grow and there's room to learn. But I do feel that a lot of people who join these group classes that are, 30 people in it, I don't feel they offer much benefit. If you yourself know what you're doing and the movements are fairly simplistic, sure. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, why are you doing it? Are you just paying for the accountability? Okay. But I don't feel you're going to get as much bang for your buck per se, as opposed to joining a smaller group class that's more customized. And again, not plugging in my own service. I'm just saying that if it were me and I was going to join a group class, most people who are doing group class training, I'm assuming it's because they can't afford to do private training, which is totally fine. I mean, why not? You can save some money, do group class, absolutely. But my recommendation would be to find a group class that's a smaller group class. So you still do receive that instruction because really, what are you going to a group class for if all you're doing is you're setting up everything on your own and you're doing all this, but no one's around to correct your form of technique? And I've heard this from multiple clients who worked with me over the years who've come to me from other gyms and they've expressed this to me and say, I was in this group class and I didn't even know the trainer's name because the trainer never came by. I'm like, well, yeah, because it's very difficult to train a group of people who are like a large group of people when you don't know their physical limitations, previous injuries, current injuries, their their actual like their whole health history. You could be working with someone who is type 2 diabetic and you wouldn't know unless you ask questions. And so, if that person starts going to a diabetic shock, you have to keep an eye on that. Right. And you say, oh, you know what? Maybe I run it back, got to get candy bar, get a juice box, whatever it may be. But these are things that I know with my clients, and these are things I watch for. And every single person on our roster who's in our group classes has trained with us for a minimum of 1 year. Okay. And then they move into group classes. So yeah, that's my theory on group classes is they can be effective, but you really have to ask yourself, is it worth it if you're in a large group and you're not getting any correction on form, technique, and you're pretty much setting up everything yourself. No one's coming by to help you. No one's coming by to spot you. Then I would start questioning that because then what are you truly paying for? All right. Okay. Nick, oh, sorry. No, sorry. I already got that question. Oh, okay. Nick, is breakfast actually the most important meal of the day? No, no, I don't think so. Here's the thing. The most important meal of the day is the meal that works with your lifestyle. Some people argue the most important meal of the day is your pre-workout meal. Again, I disagree. There's a lot of people I train who work out better in a fasted state. Okay. So for them, their most important meal would not be their pre-workout meal. Then there's other people that will say your most important meal is your post-workout meal. Maybe. But again, this will depend on your lifestyle because a lot of people who train, after they train, they're a little bit nauseous. They can't eat right away. So for those people, the most important meal is not the post-workout meal. Then you have people who they go to bed at 2 in the morning and they wake up at 11 in the morning. Well, maybe for those people, they're not hungry right away when they wake up. Maybe they need to have a cup of coffee that digests for a bit, and then after 2 or 3 hours, have a meal. And that's fine too. You have to find what works with your lifestyle, with your work schedule, with your training schedule. Okay. So, no, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. That's nonsense. Okay. And that was something that I believe that was put out by the cereal companies over the years, though, that would sell all that crap sugar cereals that to sell their product. Oh, feed your kids this crap is the most important meal of the day. When you start your kid off with a big bowl of 30 grams of sugar, that's not the most important meal of the day. Okay. You're setting that kid up for potential health issues down the road when they're older. So no, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Okay. For me, what I feel is my most important meal of the day, believe it or not, the most important meal for me is actually the last meal of the day. Because I find that last meal is crucial for me to get that in so that it allows me to sleep properly and allows me to feel full throughout the night so I don't constantly wake up throughout the night. And so I'm very careful with the last meal of the day for myself. I always make sure that the last meal for me has a lot of fiber, not too heavy in carbs, and higher in fat. Okay, and I've talked about why I like to backload the fats throughout the day. This just allows me to sleep better. Okay, so because they slowly digest. So I find that's a perfect meal for me. Very low carbs, very high fat, moderate protein, and that's my last meal of the day. And that's what the most important of the meal, the most important meal of the day for me is that meal. Okay. So don't fall into all this generic garbage that, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You need to have a protein shake after your workout. This is all garbage. Okay. This is stuff that a lot of these companies are just putting out there to sell their crap. So the most important meal of the day will depend again on your work schedule, your lifestyle, and your training regime. Okay. That's what's going to be the most important meal of the day for you. All right. We have one more question. Okay. Nick, why do most people regain weight after a diet? Simple. Because most people follow a diet that's not sustainable. Okay. So, and I've talked about how any diet you go on will work. Any diet you go on. Okay. If you're someone who's been eating really bad food, you've been eating out a lot, you've been drinking every night, and now you go on a diet, guess what? You're going to lose weight. You will. You start eating clean, you clean up your diet a little bit, you're going to lose weight. You go into a caloric deficit, you're going to lose weight. And everyone thinks, wow, this is the best diet ever. But is it? Because is the diet you're on, is it sustainable? Because if it's not, you're wasting your time. So a lot of these people, for example, they'll go on a ketosis diet. Now, everyone knows I'm a huge advocate of healthy fats. I love healthy fats. I actually think I put up another post on my Instagram how I believe fats are the most misunderstood macronutrient and also the most important macronutrient, fats. But I don't recommend people do a ketosis diet. Okay. Now, why? Well, because it's not a sustainable diet. Of course, it's going to work. Of course, you're going to lose weight on ketosis. People lose tons of weight on ketosis. But can you sustain that diet for the rest of your life? Can you avoid carbohydrates for the rest of your life? Probably not. Okay, and what happens is when you start to reintroduce carbohydrates, your insulin levels go into shock. They elevate. Your blood sugar levels drop. And now you want more carbohydrates. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but now you start to overeat the carbohydrates. And your body's become so sensitive to carbohydrates, you start putting the weight back on again. Even if they're clean carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, you've avoided that macronutrient for maybe 6 to 8 months if you're following a ketosis diet. So your body is so sensitive to those macronutrients now. In the case of complex carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, you start to put the weight back on. Okay. Same thing when people go into these very low caloric deficits and they lose all this weight. And then you see them 6 months later and they ballooned up. Sometimes you put on even more weight. Again, it's because they've slowed their metabolism down. Okay, and I talked about that last week, how when you go into a caloric deficit, your metabolism will naturally slow down. Okay, so it's a mistake to constantly reduce calories if the ultimate goal is to not just lose weight, but keep that weight off for good. Okay, so you have to put together a strategic plan. And this is why every single person I work with on a nutritional plan, especially if they're first time clients, if I've never worked with them before, I tell them I have to learn your body. And that usually takes me anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to truly learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Okay. But I can tell you what doesn't work for everyone across the board. It's constantly dropping your calories because I'm always thinking long term with my clients. I'm not thinking, oh, I want to get you down by 30 pounds in the next 2 months and that's it. See you later. No, because I want to get them down 30 pounds. 2 months to me is a little unrealistic, but in maybe 3 months, that's a realistic goal. Okay. So 30 pounds in 3 months, 10 pounds a month, that's a realistic goal, especially if you're someone who's very overweight. But I want to make sure that we can keep that weight off because for me, I fail you as a coach if you're not able to keep that weight off. Now, if you're not following the plan and you shit the bed and go, you're not working with me anymore and you're just like, eat whatever you want, well, that's on you. But if I put together a plan that after those 3 months, it's a sustainable plan that you can continue on your own for, okay, whether you're working with me or not, you're like, yeah, you know what, Nick, I feel really good on this diet. I've got lots of energy. I actually like the food I'm eating. There's lots of variety. But great, we found a program that works for you. Keep duplicating it, keep following it, keep making those revisions on a weekly basis, but make sure we're staying within that same protocol, okay? Because it's a sustainable protocol. So that's why most people put on weight with their diets is because the diets they're following are not sustainable. They're very short term and they will work short term. But I've always been that person who wants long-term results. I don't want short-term results. Okay. So I want to keep whatever results I have, I want to keep for life. Okay, so how can I do that? Well, I need to put together a plan that's sustainable. Same thing I tell people who come to work with me in the gym. I say, realistically, what can you do? Like as far as how often can you get to the gym, whether it's with me or on your own or both? If you're telling me, hey, I can get to the gym 6 days a week, but we both know you're only going to be in there twice a week, we're already setting ourselves up for failure. So we have to be realistic with our expectations, but we also have to be realistic with what we can do to achieve the results that we want to achieve with our health and physique and overall well-being. Okay. But simply put, that's why most people fail on their diets. And that's why most people who do go on these diets, they put the weight back on because it's not a sustainable plan. Okay. And as I've said time and time again, if it's not sustainable, it won't be successful. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, August the 4th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.